She didn't know which was more terrifying, the man who cleared an entire restaurant with a single command, or the way her grandmother's mysterious perfume made him go still, as if he were recognizing a ghost from a life he should have left buried. That night, under the dim lights of Marcello's, Sophia realized her world was no longer her own. A scent she barely understood had unlocked a door into danger, bloodlines, and a truth she was never meant to outrun. And once he spoke her grandmother's name, nothing would ever be the same again. Before we begin, if you believe that fate never loses its way, make sure to subscribe. It's free and helps us share more stories from Desire Tales. Sophia clocked in at Marcello's the way she always did on Wednesdays, slipping through the service entrance at 4:47 p.m., 14 minutes before Miami's beautiful people swept through the front doors as if they owned the night. Fluorescent light washed over the narrow hallway, catching the tired slope of her shoulders as she pulled her dark hair into a tight bun and pinned it with the same pearl clip her mother had given her 7 years ago, back when Catherine's hands still remembered how to fasten buttons without shaking. The black uniform hung looser on her now, not from illness, but from the kind of slow erosion that comes with 60-hour weeks and meals eaten standing up. Her paycheck moved through her life like a ghost. In on Friday, gone by Monday. Rent, gas, groceries, and always without fail the $3,200 wired to Clearview Assisted Living, 30 minutes away and a lifetime out of reach. Clearview smelled of polished floors, industrial cleaner, and something underneath that was harder to name. Old sadness, maybe, or the residue of too many goodbyes stretched out over too many months. That morning, like every Monday, Wednesday, and Saturday, she had sat in its common room under soft yellow lights, pretending the smell didn't get to her. Catherine had been lucid, which meant she knew Sophia's face but not always the exact role it played in her life. Her fingers picked nervously at the hem of her cardigan, moving constantly as if afraid they would forget how. "You work too hard," she had murmured, eyes drifting toward the window and the clipped bushes outside. Sophia had smiled, the automatic kind. "I'm fine, Mom. You're comfortable there. That's what matters." She watched guilt flutter behind her mother's gaze, a small trapped bird that knew it cost too much to stay alive. Sophia understood that somewhere inside Catherine, two realities were trying to exist at once: the knowledge that her care demanded sacrifice, and the confusion that erased that knowledge as the disease advanced. Some days the guilt won. Most days the fog did. The doctors talked about progression curves and stages, but deterioration hadn't read their charts. It arrived when it wanted, stayed as long as it liked, and never once apologized. Sophia had stopped trying to predict anything. She just showed up on schedule because consistency was the only promise she could still keep. By the time she pushed open the door to Marcello's kitchen, the air had shifted from institutional sterility to organized chaos. Stainless steel counters gleamed under heat lamps. Pans hissed. Orders were already lined up in sharp black ink. Marcus, the head chef, worked at his station like a surgeon who didn't believe in small talk. 15 years in New York had carved permanent lines of focus into his face and gifted him a particular disdain for front-of-house staff. He didn't look up when she entered. He never did. Sophia didn't take it personally. In this world, his indifference was as natural as gravity. She grabbed her order pad and server's book from their usual spot, lips moving silently as she rehearsed the night's specials. Outside, couples would be circling the block, looking for parking and the illusion of spontaneity. Valentine's Day was next week, and Marcello's had become a testing ground, a place where people tried out restaurants the way they tried out relationships, wanting something that looked impressive without risking anything too unfamiliar. Power also loved this room. Deals made over wine, secrets traded between courses, reputations built or broken somewhere between the appetizer and the check. Sophia checked her section, adjusted the angle of a water glass by a fraction of an inch, straightened a knife she knew no one else would notice. This, at least, she could control. The choreography of service, the small rituals that made the evening feel predictable even when life outside these walls refused to be. The hum of conversation was still a distant future. For a moment in the half-lit dining room, it felt like she was standing on a stage before the curtain rose, everyone holding their breath for that first line. The last thing she did before taking her position was walk toward the staff lockers, where a small velvet pouch waited for her and the perfume that would change everything. Sophia opened her locker, the metal door creaking softly as if it, too, sensed the weight of the moment. Inside, wrapped in a worn velvet pouch, rested the crystal bottle her grandmother had pressed into her hands 2 months before slipping away. She held it carefully, the facets catching the fluorescent light and scattering it across her palm in tiny flecks, like trapped stars fighting to escape. The glass felt strangely alive, as if memory clung to its surface. She uncorked it and dabbed the perfume onto her wrists and the hollow of her throat, where her pulse beat visibly beneath her pale skin. The scent unfurled slowly, not floral but ancient, layered with something like amber and old libraries, church pews and secrets whispered in echoing hallways. A flower anchored the heart of it, a bloom she couldn't name, one that didn't belong in any garden she'd ever seen. Every breath revealed a new note, as if the perfume rearranged itself in real time, refusing to be fully understood. It wasn't just fragrance. It was architecture, a symphony built out of something older than she could comprehend. Her grandmother Victoria had given it to her in one of those rare hours when the morphine fog parted and clarity stepped forward long enough to speak. "This is important," she'd whispered, her grip unexpectedly strong for someone so close to the edge. "When someone recognizes this, when someone knows it, you'll understand things. About our family. About why I kept you safe." Sophia had tried to ask what that meant, but the words had scattered as quickly as they'd come, swallowed again by pain and silence. Safe from what? Protected from whom? Victoria had never been cryptic until the very end, and the sudden shift into riddles had unnerved Sophia more than the impending loss itself. Her grandmother had been practical all her life. No poetry, no secrets, no unnecessary mystique. So why this? Why now? And why this perfume with its impossible scent and its weight that felt heavier than glass should allow? She capped the bottle and set it gently back into the velvet pouch, tucking it away as if hiding a piece of forbidden knowledge. Something inside her tightened. A flicker of intuition. A whisper telling her that wearing it tonight meant something. Not fate. Not destiny. But consequence. She squared her shoulders, inhaling once more, letting the scent settle into her skin. Whatever the perfume carried, memory, warning, legacy, she'd have to face it. By 5 p.m., the restaurant was half full. The early crowd trickled in. Couples smiling too brightly, businessmen murmuring over discreet deals, servers weaving through the aisles with trays balanced like extensions of their bodies. Sophia slipped into the rhythm easily, her movements automatic, her mind still echoing with her grandmother's words. She recommended the risotto to the indecisive. She adjusted wine glasses with muscle memory. She pretended not to notice the ache in her chest whenever she thought of Clearview. But beneath the polished routine, something felt different. The perfume moved with her, a silent shadow. By the time Marcus called her over and nodded toward the corner booth, telling her that a particular man had arrived, a man who always wanted something special, something off menu, Sophia felt it. A shift in the air. A tightening in her ribs. As if the night had been waiting for her to take this exact step. The moment Marcus angled his chin toward the back booth, Sophia followed his gaze and felt her pulse hitch, as if her body recognized something before her mind had time to catch up. The corner table, half shadow, half spotlight, was where people sat when they wanted to be seen without being approached. And tonight someone had claimed it. Someone who didn't blend into the room so much as bend the room subtly around himself. He sat with the stillness of a predator who didn't need to move to command attention. Mid-30s, maybe slightly older. Black hair combed back from a high forehead with an almost old-world precision. A suit cut so perfectly it looked like it had been sewn onto him. Gray fabric molding to broad shoulders and a posture that radiated control. His hands rested on the table motionless, the way someone rests their hands when they know they'll never need to reach for anything. They already own their environment. But it was his eyes that held her attention. Even across the room she could see the depth of them. Dark brown, almost absorbing the low ambient light instead of reflecting it. They moved slowly, methodically, cataloging the restaurant as if every person, every plate, every conversation carried information worth storing. He didn't watch the room. He read it. And when his gaze passed over her, Sophia felt a brief prickling down the back of her neck, as though someone had whispered her name behind her. She forced her attention back to the table she was serving, to the couple debating dessert, to the scripted lines she delivered with ease. But she felt the man's awareness settle on her like a new gravity. Not invasive, just present. A presence so anchored it made the rest of the restaurant feel slightly out of focus. She finished the couple's order, slipped behind the host's stand briefly, and reminded herself not to make unnecessary eye contact. Certain patrons mistook a glance for an invitation, and this was not someone she wanted to accidentally invite. By 7:15, Marcus gestured to her again. "He's yours," he said simply. "Take the wine list. Daniel will prep his vintage. Don't ask questions. Just stand there, take his order, and let him tell you what he wants." Sophia nodded, though something in her chest tightened. She smoothed her apron, made sure her notepad was ready, and crossed the dining room toward the booth like someone approaching a threshold she didn't realize she'd been walking toward her entire life. As she drew closer, the air seemed to shift. Not literally, no temperature drop, no breeze, no sudden silence. But something in the atmosphere tightened, like a string being pulled taut. His eyes lifted, meeting hers with a precision that made the rest of the room fall away. She opened her mouth to speak, to offer the practiced greeting she'd recited 1,000 times, but the perfume reached him first. She saw it, just a flicker but unmistakable. A stillness sharper than stillness. His hands froze. His jaw flexed. His eyes closed briefly, like a man hearing a familiar melody played after decades of silence. Sophia didn't breathe. Neither did he. And in that suspended moment, something ancient and unspoken settled between them. When he opened his eyes again, the shift was undeniable. Subtle but seismic, like a tremor deep beneath the earth that hasn't yet reached the surface. Sophia steadied her voice and delivered the line she'd rehearsed countless times. "Good evening. Can I start you with something to drink?" The words felt small in the space between them. He studied her with an intensity that wasn't curiosity, wasn't interest, wasn't even recognition. It was assessment, sharp and absolute. As if he were piecing together a puzzle he hadn't expected to see tonight. "I'll have the Barolo," he said quietly, his voice low and even, each syllable landing with quiet authority. "The 1989 vintage." He paused as if measuring something in the air, something only he could sense. Then, without raising his tone, without shifting his posture, he added, "And I need the dining room cleared." Sophia blinked. Surely she'd misheard. "I'm sorry. Everyone out," he said, still holding her gaze. "Now." He didn't gesture. He didn't threaten. Yet the words moved through the room like a command written into the architecture itself. Chairs scraped. Appetizers were abandoned mid-bite. The hum of conversation collapsed into a stunned hush. Even the clinking of silverware seemed to freeze. The manager reacted first, stepping forward with a calm, rehearsed tone that telegraphed both respect and fear. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're closing the dining room for a brief safety procedure. Please gather your belongings and make your way to the East Corridor." Within minutes, Marcello's transformed from a bustling dining room into something hollow and waiting, as if every sound had been siphoned out through the exits. Servers vanished behind the kitchen door. Marcus appeared for a single heartbeat, assessed the situation without a word, and retreated. The man at the booth hadn't moved an inch. His stillness wasn't passive, it was power refined to its purest form. Sophia stood rooted to the floor, her order pad dangling from her fingers. Her training told her this was impossible, that no customer had the right to evacuate an entire restaurant. But the look in his eyes told her something else, that this wasn't about entitlement. It was about certainty. The certainty of a man who didn't need explanations because he expected the world to rearrange itself when he spoke. When the last guest disappeared and the host's stand fell silent, he finally rose. He moved slowly, deliberately, every motion controlled, as though any sudden shift might shatter the fragile equilibrium now hanging between them. As he stepped toward her, Sophia felt the weight of his attention settle on her skin like a second heartbeat. And when he spoke again, the question he asked pulled the night deeper into a place she did not yet understand. He approached her with the measured calm of someone stepping across a fault line, aware that one wrong move could fracture everything beneath them. Sophia held her ground, though her pulse thudded hard enough that she wondered if he could hear it. He stopped just a few feet from her, close enough that she could see the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw, close enough that the scent of her grandmother's perfume drifted between them like a bridge neither of them had intended to cross. "Where did you get this?" he asked. "Not the wine. Not the service. The perfume." His voice had changed, lower now, rougher at the edges, as though the question scraped against something old inside him. "The scent you're wearing. Where did it come from?" Sophia's throat tightened. "It was my grandmother's," she said, hearing her own voice as if from a distance. "She gave it to me before she died. 2 months ago." His reaction was instantaneous, sharp enough to cut the air. His shoulders tensed. A tendon pulsed against his jaw. His right hand curled briefly into a fist before he forced it open again, fingers pressing hard against his thigh as if grounding himself. "Your grandmother's name," he said. Not a question. A command cloaked in velvet. "Victoria," she whispered. "Victoria Mitchell." The transformation in him was almost violent. For a split second he looked like someone struck by a physical blow. He turned away abruptly, bracing a hand on the window frame, the muscles in his back locked tight beneath the tailored suit. Sophia watched his breath hitch, saw him force each inhale like someone climbing out of deep water. The room felt too quiet. No clatter from the kitchen, no hum from the dining room, just the drone of the air conditioner and her own heartbeat clawing at her ribs. "Say it again," he said, still facing the glass. "Her name. Victoria Mitchell." He went still, completely still. Then he turned, and for the first time she saw something crack through his composure, grief, disbelief, an ache so old it seemed carved into bone. She had dark blue eyes, he murmured softly, hands that trembled when she was thinking too hard. He stepped closer slowly like he was approaching a ghost. "You have her jawline." Sophia backed up a fraction, instinct fighting confusion. "You're mistaken. I don't know you. I've never seen you before." "No," he said quietly, "but I knew her. And if you're her granddaughter, then nothing I believed about the past is true anymore." His voice dropped to something almost human, almost raw. Sit down, Sophia, because what I'm about to tell you will change everything you think you know about your family. Sophia sat because her legs no longer trusted her to keep standing. The chair felt colder than it should have, as if the night itself had begun to contract around them. He moved back to his seat with a deliberate calm that looked fragile now, stretched thin over whatever storm was battering inside him. When he looked at her, the intensity was still there, but something else had surfaced too. Something older. Something wounded. Tell me about her, he said. Tell me about Victoria. Not the public details. Not the obituary lines. Tell me who she became. His voice was steady, but the steadiness felt earned, not natural. Sophia swallowed hard. She died of pancreatic cancer, she began, her words halting at first. Hospice. Morphine. The last weeks were. They weren't kind. The memories rose faster than she expected. Antiseptic rooms, fading light, the soft rattle of breath. She had moments of clarity, she continued. Short ones. The pain medication stole most of them, but sometimes she came back long enough to say things that didn't make sense. He leaned forward slightly. What things? She said my life wasn't random, Sophia whispered. That I needed to keep the perfume safe. That when someone recognized it, I'd understand what she was protecting me from. The second the words left her mouth, Luca went rigid. His fingers curled around the edge of the table, knuckles whitening beneath the pressure. Something in his expression broke open, a flicker of pain or fear, or maybe both intertwined too tightly to separate. She said that. His voice was barely audible. Yes, over and over. She pulled herself out of the morphine haze just to say it again. Luca stood abruptly. The chair scraped sharply against the floor, the sound slicing the silence like a blade. He walked toward the window again, shoulders rising and falling with deep, controlled breaths. Sophia watched him like someone watching a volatile element being heated, waiting to see whether it would settle or explode. When he spoke, his voice came out hollow. Your grandmother was married once before the man you knew as your grandfather. His name was Marco Ravellini. My brother. He turned slowly, his gaze locking onto hers. Their marriage ended badly. Victoria was brave enough to leave our world. Few ever did. Sophia felt the words thud into her chest, heavy, disorienting, reshaping everything she thought she knew. She left while she was pregnant, he said. She didn't tell Marco. She knew our family would use that child to keep her trapped. So she ran. She vanished. She built a life far from us. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a card. A simple one, embossed with his name and a single number. He set it gently on the table between them. Tomorrow you'll call me. You won't tell anyone about this conversation. Not yet. And you won't look for answers elsewhere. Some truths can only be spoken privately. Sophia stared at the card, her breath unsteady. Why me? She whispered. Because, Luca said quietly, the moment I smelled that perfume, I realized the past I thought was dead had walked into the room wearing your face. Sophia didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her bed with her laptop glowing in the darkness, the business card resting beside her like a loaded question. She typed his name, Luca Ravellini, into the search bar, expecting the internet to hand her answers. Instead, what she found was a void disguised as information. A handful of articles, whispers of investigations, mentions of organized operations and alleged activity. The kind of language reporters used when they knew there was danger behind the curtain but couldn't afford to pull it open. She shifted her search. Isabella Ravellini. And suddenly pieces surfaced. Old magazine clippings. Interviews from the 90s. Photos of an elegant woman with silver hair and eyes sharp as polished steel, posing beside delicate bottles of perfume that looked eerily similar to the one in Sophia's locker. Perfume Ravellini. Fragrances crafted not for sale, but for gifting. A family tradition so private it bordered on myth. A line she crafted only for people she considered worthy, people she claimed as her own. The last interview was dated decades ago. Then an obituary. 87 years old. No heirs listed. No public ceremony. Just a life that had evaporated from the world without leaving footprints behind. Sophia's chest tightened. Her grandmother had worn something created by that woman. Passed it on. Asked her to protect it. To wait for the moment someone recognized it. And Luca had recognized it instantly. She searched deeper. Marriage records. Genealogy archives. A certificate from 1978. Victoria Castillo married Marco Ravellini. Dissolved in 1991. No children listed. Officially, at least. Sophia stared at her birth year, 1996, and felt something cold unspool down her spine. The dates didn't line up neatly. Nothing about her family ever had. She dug further, pulling threads that kept unraveling into darker corners. One more search. A name she didn't know she was looking for until it came to her fingers. Elena Ravellini. A police report from 7 years ago. Suicide, the official line said. Overdose. No note. No motive. And yet, something about the phrasing in the article felt off, like there were paragraphs missing, like questions had been asked quietly and buried even quieter. Sophia felt the room shrink around her as she scanned the report again and again. Then at 3:47 a.m., an email arrived in her inbox. The sender was listed only as NR. The message held just a few lines. You search thoroughly. Good instincts. But public records can only tell so much. Call the number at 10 o'clock. Not before. Not after. Her breath caught. He was watching. Not just her movements. Her research. Her questions. Her curiosity. She was under observation by someone who understood surveillance far too well. By sunrise, she wasn't sure whether she wanted answers or to run from them. But as the clock approached 10, her hand moved toward her phone on its own. She dialed the number the second the minute changed. Luca answered on the first ring. Good, he said softly. Now the real conversation begins. His voice on the other end of the line held the same calm force that had emptied an entire restaurant with a single command. A car is coming for you, he said. 20 minutes. You'll bring only the phone you're holding. No weapons, no recordings, no attempts to document anything. And you won't tell anyone where you're going. Sophia's breath snagged, caught between instinct and inevitability. Do you agree? He asked. And though every rational part of her urged caution, the truth was already forming on her tongue. I agree. The line went dead. The apartment felt suddenly too quiet, too small, as if the walls had shifted inward. She moved mechanically, not packing, not preparing. Just sitting at the kitchen table while the seconds crawled across her clock. When the black sedan pulled to a stop outside, she felt something inside her settle with the weight of a choice she couldn't undo. The driver, a silver-haired woman with unreadable eyes, opened the door without a word. Sophia climbed in. The windows were tinted dark enough to turn the city into a blur of moving shadows, making it impossible to track the route. The silence between her and the driver wasn't awkward. It was intentional. A boundary drawn by someone who understood the value of withheld information. Sophia's fingers closed around her purse strap, knuckles white. Every turn of the car felt like entering deeper territory, a place where ordinary rules dissolved. When the vehicle finally slowed, She stepped out into a world she'd never imagined touching. A mansion rose behind wrought iron gates, the architecture elegant but fortified, surrounded by palms planted as carefully as sentinels. It wasn't ostentatious. It was strategic. A home designed by someone who understood the difference between wealth and power and knew exactly which one he possessed. Inside, the air was cool and still, carrying a faint trace of cedar and something like old books. Art lined the hallways, pieces chosen by someone with taste rather than someone trying to impress. First editions filled glass-fronted shelves. Everything felt curated with thought, not ego. The quiet here wasn't empty, it was controlled, intentional. A world with its own rules and its own gravity. He was waiting for her in a room he called a study, though it looked more like a sanctuary of leather chairs, warm light, and windows overlooking a garden too lush to be accidental. He stood when she entered. Without the sharp gray suit from Marcello's, dressed now in charcoal slacks and rolled sleeves, he looked somehow more dangerous, like armor removed didn't make him softer, only more precise. "Sit," he said. But the word wasn't a command this time. It was an invitation, an acknowledgement. She lowered herself into the chair opposite him, her pulse thudding in her throat. And when he began speaking, when he said her grandmother had been married to his brother, when he revealed the lineage she never knew she carried, Sophia felt her world tilt in a way that made the room seem both too bright and too unreal. Luca spoke as if every sentence carried the weight of years he'd spent rehearsing it in silence. "Victoria married my brother Marco in 1978. Their marriage ended when she realized what our family truly was. She left to save herself." His eyes drifted toward the window, the glass reflecting the quiet storm beneath his composure. "What she didn't know," he continued, "was that she was already carrying Marco's child, Catherine." Sophia felt the air leave her chest in a slow, stunned exhale. Her mother, her fragile, fading mother, had been born into a world she never even knew existed. A world she'd spent her entire life unknowingly running from. "Marco found out years later," Luca said. "After Victoria disappeared. He hired investigators. He knew she had a daughter. He knew Catherine existed. And he chose not to interfere. It was the one noble decision he ever made." His gaze returned to Sophia, steady and unblinking. "Victoria kept your mother away from us because she understood what this family does to its own. But she also understood that bloodlines leave shadows. And Isabella, our grandmother, understood that too. She created the perfume for Catherine. A marker. A legacy. A coded signal meant only for us." Sophia's pulse hammered against her ribs as she realized the implications. Her choosing to wear it wasn't random. It was a step into a history that had been waiting for her. "She gave it to Victoria before Marco died," Luca said quietly. "And Victoria, she passed it down to you." His voice softened on the last word, as if the act itself held a kind of reverence. Sophia's fingers drifted subconsciously toward her wrist, toward the fading trace of the perfume. "So every time I wore it," she whispered, "I was carrying your family's signature." Luca nodded once slowly. Only a Ravellini would recognize it. Only someone raised inside this world would know the scent, the formula, the history bound into it. He leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees, every movement unhurried but deliberate. "When you walked toward that table at Marcello's, I thought I was imagining things. But then the perfume reached me. And I knew exactly who you were, before you even said your name." Sophia swallowed hard, heat rising behind her eyes. The truth rearranged her memories. Every visit to Clearview, every quiet moment with Catherine, every story Victoria never told. Her life wasn't a collection of coincidences. It was a map someone had drawn long before she could read it. "Why now?" she asked softly. "Why tell me all this? Why pull me into your world?" "Because," Lucas said, his voice low, almost reverent, "some things don't stay buried. Some bloodlines don't disappear just because someone tried to hide them. And the moment you wore that perfume into my orbit, Sophia, everything that had been unresolved for decades came rushing back to claim you." The room felt smaller now, as if the walls had eased closer to listen. Sophia pressed her palms together to steady the tremble running through her fingers. Everything Luca had said sat inside her like a weight, too heavy to lift, too significant to ignore. "If all of this is true," she said softly, "then what does it make me?" Luca's expression didn't shift, but something in his eyes did. A flicker of recognition, maybe empathy, maybe regret, surfacing and sinking in a single breath. "It makes you part of a story you didn't choose," he replied. "But one that won't release you just because you didn't ask for it." He stood, not pacing, just moving with that deliberate, grounded weight he carried everywhere. "There are people who would use your bloodline to pull you into things you're not prepared for. And there are people who would try to erase you because of what you represent." The calm in his voice made the danger feel colder, more real. "You need to understand that. You need to understand all of it." Sophia rose from her chair, needing the distance even if it was only a few steps. Her pulse thudded hard against her ribs. "All I've done is work, pay bills, visit my mom, and try to make it through the week. I didn't ask for any of this." The truth tasted raw. "I don't want a legacy. I want my life." Luca watched her carefully, not with pity but with comprehension, the kind only someone shaped by their own inheritance could have. "I'm not asking you to accept it tonight," he said. "But the people who care about bloodlines won't wait for your comfort." His gaze held hers steady, unflinching. "You're exposed now. The moment you walked into that restaurant wearing Isabella's signature, the moment I recognized it, the world behind mine shifted. And you became a variable, a valuable one, a dangerous one." His voice dropped. "Which means you need protection." The word echoed through her, protection. It felt like both a promise and a trap. "From who?" she asked. "From what?" Luca exhaled, the sound controlled, almost weary. "From people who believe you are a loose end. From those who would question your legitimacy. From those who would use you to manipulate me. Our world doesn't have bystanders, Sophia. Anyone touched by it becomes part of it." Her heart twisted, not with fear, but with something more complicated, something she didn't yet have a name for. "I don't trust you," she said, and the honesty steadied her spine. Luca nodded once. "You shouldn't. Not yet." He moved closer, stopping far enough to keep the moment from tipping into something it wasn't meant to be. "But I'm the only one who recognized what you are. And the only one who understands what that means. Your grandmother kept you safe until the end. Now that responsibility falls to me." Sophia looked away, the words settling into her like a slow-burning fuse. She didn't know whether to run from him or toward the answers he carried. She only knew the ground beneath her old life was cracking, and nothing she had believed about herself felt stable anymore. When she finally met his gaze again, his expression was quiet, waiting, certain. Something inside her shifted, an acceptance not of the truth, but of the fact that she could no longer ignore it. Sophia followed him out of the study and into a corridor lined with soft pools of amber light. The mansion felt like a world built out of silence and intent, a place where footsteps carried meaning and shadows held history. Luca walked a few steps ahead, his posture straight, his hands loose at his sides, relaxed but never unguarded. He moved like someone raised to anticipate danger even when none appeared. She realized, with a quiet jolt, that this wasn't confidence. It was conditioning. He led her into a room she hadn't seen before. Sleek, pristine, filled with stainless steel counters and glass cabinets. A laboratory, but not the hospital kind. More like the workshop of someone who understood chemistry the way composers understand sound. Vials lined the shelves, some labeled, some blank, each holding a small universe of scent and memory. At the center was a long table with instruments arranged in perfect symmetry, and at the far end a single wooden box. "This is where Isabella worked," Luca said, resting his fingertips on the table as though touching a relic. "She crafted every fragrance by hand. No apprentices. No formulas written down. Everything lived here." He tapped his temple. "And here." He touched the wooden box. This was her final creation. The one she designed for Catherine before she left us. Sophia's breath caught. The perfume. The very scent wrapped around her skin right now. A legacy she hadn't even known she was carrying. He opened the box. Inside lay a small crystal bottle nearly identical to the one she kept in her locker. Except this one was still full, the liquid glinting like captured dusk. The air shifted the moment the lid lifted, the room filling with the faintest whisper of a scent she recognized intimately. But this version was deeper, untouched by time, unfiltered by loss. It was like hearing a song for the first time after years of knowing only the echo. "This bottle was meant for your mother," Luca said softly. "But she never received it. Victoria fled too quickly. And Isabella. She waited for years, hoping Catherine would return." His voice edged with something raw. "When she didn't, Isabella locked this away. She died believing Catherine had chosen to abandon the family completely." He looked up, meeting Sophia's gaze. "She didn't know your grandmother was protecting her." Sophia stepped closer, her heart thudding. "And now you're giving it to me?" "No," he said. "Not yet. I'm showing you what you come from." He closed the box gently, the click of the latch soft but final. "You needed to see this before you decide anything. Before you decide who you are in all of this." Sophia let her hand rest on the lid, feeling the cool grain of the wood, the quiet pulse of history humming beneath her palm. For the first time, she felt the full gravity of what had been passed down to her. Not wealth, not power, but the weight of choices others had made long before she was born. And she realized that stepping into this world wasn't something she could undo. Some lines, once crossed, couldn't be uncrossed. Some truths couldn't be unlearned. And tonight she had crossed one without even meaning to. Luca closed the box and rested both hands on it as though anchoring himself. "There's something you need to understand," he said. His voice wasn't sharp this time. It carried the steadiness of someone preparing another person for a truth that would alter the shape of their life. "The moment I cleared that restaurant, anyone watching me would have noticed. And anyone watching me will now be watching you." Sophia's stomach tightened. "Because I'm connected to your family? Because you appeared out of nowhere wearing a signature only a Ravellini should own." He walked to the window overlooking the garden, the late morning sun casting a muted glow across his profile. "Our world feeds on patterns, on disappearances, on bloodlines. Someone will question who you are, and someone will try to use that answer in ways you can't imagine." He turned slightly, his expression unreadable. "FBI eyes have been on me for years, quiet, patient, persistent. They're not building a case, they're waiting for a crack." He paused. "You walking into my life wearing Isabella's scent. That crack just appeared. And I can promise you they'll come to you. They'll pretend it's harmless. A few questions. A request for cooperation. But they won't tell you that every word you give them becomes ammunition." Sophia sank onto the nearest stool, the weight of his warning settling like cold iron around her ribs. So what do I do? You do nothing without thinking 5 steps ahead. His tone sharpened, not unkind but firm, as if he were carving the advice directly into her future. You don't answer questions you don't understand. You don't trust strangers who suddenly care about your history. And you don't walk alone at night until I know who else knows you exist. Sophia felt a tremor start low in her spine. This sounds like I'm already in danger. You are, Luca said simply. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because you're now a variable in a world that measures risk with blood. He approached her slowly, stopping when they were close enough for her to feel the gravity of him in the air. You don't have to trust me, but you do need to believe this. Ignoring what you've learned will not make it disappear. She looked up at him. For a moment, something flickered across his face. Concern disguised as formality, something like responsibility laced with reluctance. What do you want from me? She whispered. Nothing, Luca replied. Not until you understand the cost of choosing a side. And you will have to choose one. His voice lowered. Silence is a side too. The room seemed to hold its breath. Outside, the garden rustled softly, untouched by the tension coiling in the space between them. Sophia felt the faint trace of her grandmother's perfume lift from her wrist, blending into the room like a memory slipping into the present. She realized suddenly and painfully that she wasn't standing at the edge of a revelation. She was already inside it. And there was no way back to the person she had been even 24 hours earlier. Sophia left the study with her pulse still racing, the world outside Luca's mansion feeling sharper, louder, almost metallic. The drive home passed in a blur, streetlights streaking across the windshield like fractured thoughts. By the time she reached her apartment, the silence inside felt too thin, too breakable, as if one wrong breath might shatter it. She sat on her bed without turning on the lights and tried to rebuild her sense of reality from the pieces scattered across her mind. The next morning, nothing felt normal. Her shoes were the same. Her uniform was the same. Marcello's smelled of garlic and polished wood, just as always. But she felt split in two, her body performing familiar motions while her mind kept replaying the moment Luca said she was now a variable in a world measured in blood. Every smile she offered a customer felt like a disguise. Every sound behind her made her shoulders tense. The weight of her grandmother's perfume, faint but still present on her skin, felt like a countdown she couldn't hear but could sense ticking. She forced herself through her shift, counting the minutes until she could leave. She didn't see Luca, didn't hear from him, and told herself that was good. Space was clarity. Distance was safety. Yet silence only made her more aware of how close danger had come, how it had already marked her without her permission. When she stepped into the alley behind the restaurant to take out the trash, a gust of wind carried the scent of the sea. She shivered, suddenly imagining another pair of eyes watching from the shadows. That night, she found herself standing at her bathroom sink, staring at her reflection. She looked unchanged, but everything behind her eyes felt rearranged. She wanted answers, wanted clarity, wanted control, but instead found herself whispering, "What did you get me into, Grandma?" Her reflection didn't answer, though something inside her felt the shift. She slipped the perfume bottle into a drawer and closed it softly, as though tucking away something alive. Meanwhile, across Miami, Luca stood alone in his study, surrounded by shadows that belonged to him. He poured a glass of Barolo but didn't drink it. His mind kept returning to the way she looked when fear met comprehension. How she didn't collapse, didn't run, only absorbed the truth like someone who'd spent her whole life bracing for impact. He knew the only responsible choice was distance. He also knew distance felt like stepping away from something he'd been unknowingly searching for. Rosa entered quietly, placing a file on his desk. "Monitoring shows she's safe," she said. For now. Luca nodded, but his jaw tightened. For now isn't enough. He looked toward the window where the city lights flickered like warnings. She needs time. And she needs space from me. Rosa studied him a long moment. And what do you need? Luca didn't answer. But his silence made it clear. He needed the very thing he had just decided to stay away from. Sophia lay awake that night, staring at her ceiling as the city hummed below. Her life used to feel predictable even if exhausting. Now it felt like a door had opened, and behind it was a corridor she couldn't see the end of. She didn't know if Luca was dangerous or necessary, or both. But she knew one thing with unsettling clarity. The distance between them wasn't protection. It was pressure. And sooner or later, something would force that distance to collapse. The week unfolded with a strange electric tension, quiet but charged like the air before a storm. Sophia went to work, visited Catherine, cooked simple meals, washed dishes, moved through the routines of her life. Yet everything felt as if it were happening under glass. She didn't hear from Luca again. Not a call. Not a message. Not even an accidental sighting. The silence felt deliberate, as if he were holding every word behind his teeth, waiting for something she couldn't see. At Clearview, Catherine had a lucid morning, one of her rare, precious ones. She squeezed Sophia's hand with surprising strength. "You're carrying something heavy," Catherine murmured. "I can feel it." Sophia swallowed hard. "I'm fine, Mom." "You're not," Catherine whispered. "But you will be. You're my girl. We survive things." The clarity in her mother's eyes flickered, then dimmed again. It left Sophia with a hollow ache that followed her out of the building and into the parking lot. That evening, as rain swept through Miami in sudden, frantic bursts, Sophia found herself pacing her living room. She tried music, tea, a shower. Nothing settled her. Every instinct said something was shifting, something she couldn't see yet, but could feel tightening around her like invisible thread. When the knock came at her door, it sent a jolt down her spine. She approached cautiously. Through the peephole stood two people in dark jackets, water sliding off their shoulders, Special Agents Morrison and Park. "Again. We're not here to harass you," Morrison said, her voice calm but edged with urgency. "We believe you're in danger." Sophia opened the door only halfway. "Why?" Park held up a thin file. "We've intercepted chatter suggesting that someone connected to Luca Ravellini discovered your existence. That usually doesn't end well for the people involved." Sophia felt the room tilt slightly. "I don't know anything," she insisted. "That's why you're valuable," Park replied. "People like you get used as leverage. We're here because we don't want you to end up collateral damage." Morrison stepped forward. "We can place you somewhere safe. We can offer protection. But we need cooperation in return." Cooperation. The word tasted like pressure and betrayal at the same time. Sophia's heart pounded in her chest. Before she could answer, headlights washed across her window, sharp, deliberate, urgent. A car stopped outside. Another knock sounded, this one harder, faster. Morrison stiffened. Park reached for his holster. Sophia's breath caught as Rosa's voice came through the door. "Sophia. It's me. Open now." Morrison whispered. "Don't. She works for him." Sophia whispered back. "You think I didn't know that?" She opened the door. Rosa stood dripping rainwater, urgency in every line of her face. "We have to go," she said. "Now." "Why?" Sophia asked. "Because the FBI isn't the only one watching you tonight," Rosa replied. "And the others don't knock." Sophia turned back toward Morrison and Park, torn between two worlds tightening around her like jaws. "Sophia," Morrison said quietly, "choose carefully. This is the moment everything changes. Sophia stood between the two doorways, Rosa on one side, the agents on the other, each representing a different danger, a different kind of protection, a different version of the truth. Rain hammered the pavement outside, loud enough to make the world feel unstable. Morrison spoke first, her voice steady but urgent. If you walk out with her, you disappear into his world. And you may never walk back out. Rosa countered equally sharp. If you stay with them, you'll be treated like a bargaining chip. They don't protect people. They use them until they break. Sophia's breath came shallow. She felt the moment expanding, stretching the way glass stretches right before it shatters. She thought of Catherine's trembling hands. She thought of Victoria's final warning. And she thought of the scent that had started all of this, Isabella's creation that refused to vanish from her skin. Rosa took a single step forward. Someone else has discovered you, she said. And they're not Ravellinis. They don't care who you are. They just care what you're worth. Morrison matched her step. We're offering lawful protection. Witness security if necessary. A new life, a clean break. But Sophia heard the unspoken part clearly. Cooperation in exchange for safety, her story becoming evidence, her identity becoming a tool. She looked at Rosa, who added quietly, Luca sent me because he believes you're in danger. He didn't call. He didn't come himself. He sent someone he trusts. That means something. Sophia felt something tighten behind her ribs, not fear but clarity. She knew Luca made choices with surgical precision. Sending Rosa wasn't distance, it was intention. She turned back to the agents. I'm not running, she said. I'm not disappearing into some program. And I'm not betraying information I don't fully understand. Park exhaled sharply. Then you're choosing the criminals. No, Sophia said. I'm choosing the truth, wherever it actually is. She stepped toward Rosa. Morrison said softly, Sophia, if you walk out that door, you are forfeiting any protection we can provide. Sophia met her eyes. You never had the kind of protection I need. With that, she followed Rosa out into the rain. The door closed behind her with a heavy finality, like a chapter ending itself. The black car waiting at the curb wasn't one she recognized. A man in the passenger seat watched her with professional stillness. Rosa ushered her in quickly. The ride took them through unfamiliar routes, deeper into Miami's industrial edges, where the air smelled of salt and metal. Sophia tried to calm herself, but every turn felt like a step closer to a truth that would not let her look away. Finally, they stopped at a warehouse lit only by a single lamp over the entrance. Inside, shadows stretched across concrete floors, and a silhouette waited at the far end. Still, composed, unmistakable. Luca. He stood with his hands clasped behind him, shoulders tense, eyes fixed on her with a force that hit her like impact. You made your choice, he said quietly. Rainwater dripped from Sophia's hair down her cheeks, but she didn't look away. They said I was choosing criminals, she replied. But I chose not to let anyone else decide my life for me. Something in his expression broke. Only slightly relief, guilt, something deeper. He stepped closer, slow, deliberate. From this moment forward, you need to understand something, he said. Your life will move in shadows and consequences. My world doesn't forgive accidents. And your existence isn't an accident. Sophia felt her pulse steady, as if aligning itself with something inevitable. Then teach me how to survive it. Luca exhaled once sharply. No, he said. I'll teach you how to control it. Outside, thunder rolled across the bay. Inside, Luca extended his hand. Not a command this time, but an unmistakable invitation. Sophia took it. And with that quiet choice in an empty warehouse, the world she once knew dissolved, and the one waiting for her began to take shape, dark and luminous all at once. My favorite part was when Sophia finally chose her own path, stepping out of fear and into the truth, proving she was stronger than the world that tried to claim her. What was your favorite moment of justice in her story? Drop it in the comments below. Don't miss more powerful stories of fate, love, and impossible choices. Subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload.